I have to right off the bat give a standing ovation to the editors for including a full 45 seconds of John parallel parking. Really good to just include that full segment, like all the way through, was beautiful. And then the way that they just like instantly just transitioned to doing his like cool guy walk up out of the vehicle and like nothing happened was just great work right there. Love that.
A parallel parking spot the size of a football field too. That he's like getting in here, going back and forth and back.
But it was a great way to lead into that scene because it was like a very, like, I thought, awkward conversation between Justin and John, who neither of them really seemed to want to do this at all, right? I just really like
from the awkward back and forth to awkward back and forth.
There you go. There you go. Exactly.
Hello and welcome to the Bravo Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Midwinter, joined as always by Dylan Ferguson, Fergie Ferg.
Fergie.
Also, we're very pleased to be joined by the Canadian computer collector, a good friend of mine, Dan Huen.
Oh yeah, my hair may be curly, but let me tell you, my attitude is burly.
Surly was right there. Surly was right there. Well, thanks for coming on. We're going to be talking about Real Housewives of New York and Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Were either of these more compelling to you? Is there a place where you want to start?
I have a pretty general opinion about the both of them. It's a different opinion for each one, but I will say the juice is probably in Salt Lake City.
Okay, let's hit it. Let's dive right into Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Do you want to give us a quick summary of what happened on this episode?
Like, they went to a party, and that one with like the black hair who looked like a mob wife or whatever, she was like going nuts. Like,
Lisa,
you calling me she's a freaking liar. And then she like goes up to her husband, which is a stupid move if you ask me, because if you go up to someone's spouse and try and drag them through the dirt in front of them, of course they're going to be like, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what he did. And then old scrawny banana boy John jumps in and he's like, hey. He's like putting his hands on him. I'm like, dude, you're picking the wrong fight. Like, that guy's like twice as wide as
big
you.
Mistake. Big. Huge.
Like, you are never, like, that guy is never going to take down a dude that you know is shorter than him and wider. Like, it's just not going to happen. I also thought he was super inappropriate. Like, you shouldn't be, like, maybe the first one where he's like, yo, calm down, like, fine. But then when he walked over and tried to like whip him out of the conversation, I'm like, are you just not used to living in society? Like, you're not used to consequences for what you do? And then he takes him out for potato skins or whatever it was.
Yeah, smashed potatoes.
I'm like, get out of here.
Really excited about this.
And then I loved it. He's like,
that's what you got to try there.
You going to apologize to my wife? I think she deserves an apology. I'm lying in bed at like 10:30 at night. I'm like, no, she doesn't. She doesn't deserve anything. That was ridiculous.
Do you have a big question that you were left with at the end of this episode?
I was curious if what's his face, not John, but the other husband, was actually going to apologize. I was pretty happy with him being like, well, we'll see what happens, because like he's not just kissing his ass. I will say though, in the notes, that one of my favorite moments with that whole fight was when that guy John goes, "Don't say the fuck word to my wife."
Oh yeah, don't say the F word or the fuck word.
Yeah, and they had to like beep it out, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You just like, yes, we say the F word, and like when people say that stuff, but the fuck word, it sounds like toddlers fighting, you know. I had a lot of respect in the end for the other guy. I thought that he held himself really well. I think he was really good, you know, to his
Justin?
wife in that situation. Yeah, he seems like someone I respect on a show like this, which for someone who's cynical as myself, I was not ready for that. You know, I was like, this guy I can get behind, you know.
Okay, well, what do you think about him like dumping down the drain Lisa's branded products?
Yeah.
That was so funny.
He's doing exactly what like right wingers do when they like pretend to boycott things by like destroying shit that they already bought and paid for.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of Coors Light. dude, you spent like $150 on all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm so mad. I'm $150 worth of mad right now, you know?
Yeah. I just like how he like seems to be showing Whitney being like, look at me pouring this alcohol you like down the drain. And she's like, can you not do that actually?
She's constantly like, a full bottle? That was like sealed.
That was a gift.
What do you,
I kind of like
why
it.
would you give it to someone?
This is so stupid, but you stood up for me, so I'm just going to let you do
that's
this.
exactly. I wrote down, oh wow, this meltdown is legendary. And you know what my favorite part was? Like the housewife who was melting down, you said it was Angie was her name or something? Or
Lisa was having the freak out.
she was.
Yeah,
I
Lisa
felt like
Barlow.
it had so much of like a childish, like, we've never experienced real consequences for freaking out thing. And I felt the ultimate irony was that her husband was like, don't you say the F word to my wife, even though she's ruining this party for everyone right now. Like, even the regular guests, the camera would catch their faces the odd time and they'd be like, ooh, what's going on? Their children were there, for God's sakes, and they're freaking out like that. Although I kind of feel like that's par for the course, though. Like, I think a decent amount of these ladies have reached such status in their lives that they're like, if I feel like freaking out, I'm doing it. I don't even care where we are right now.
Well, that's part of the job too.
Yeah, it's kind of the expectation too.
Dylan, what stood out to you in terms of the presentation on this episode?
I have to right off the bat give a standing ovation to the editors for including a full 45 seconds of John parallel parking.
I just saw my note about that.
Really good to just include that full segment, like all the way through, was beautiful. And then the way that they just like instantly just transitioned to doing his like cool guy walk up out of the vehicle and like nothing happened was just great work right there. Love that.
Parallel parking spot the size of a football field too.
Yeah.
He's like getting in here, going back and forth and back.
You're like, my goodness. So my note was, John sucks at parallel parking, absolute loser.
But it was a great way to lead into that scene because it was like a very, like, I thought, awkward conversation between Justin and John, who neither of them really seem to want to do this at all, right? They're just like doing what they got to do. Like they did their conflict because they got dragged into it, and they don't want to, like, neither of them has their blood boiling for real. I don't think they're just like they're doing what they have to do, and the way that they sit down and they're just like, smashed potatoes is what you got to what you got to get at this place. Apparently, we got to let's do that before we do the other thing, and just like get kind of visibly uncomfortable. And I just really like
from
the
awkward back and forth to awkward back and forth.
There you go. There you go.
It's like,
Exactly.
we gotta squash this beef so I can get back to running room and hang out there for a while.
Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant inclusion as well. And also the way that this scene is shot, it's like pretty striking. I like how it ends on this low angle of them at the table just awkwardly sipping on their old fashions that they ordered and eating their smashed potatoes. So really,
Well, yeah, like, what did they even resolve there, right? Like, it felt so awkward. Then the request for an apology was like the awkward icing on the cake. And then dude's sitting there like,
Yeah.
I can't give you anything else. And so like it was great that they ended it that way, because the editor really captured the awkwardness of that whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were trying to just smooth it over so that they could move on and like be cool. Like, I feel like that's just the way a lot of men tend to operate. It's like, okay, let's put this behind us, move on. And
I also wonder if on some level one of the producers was like, look, like, this is just part of the show. Like, John amped it up because he probably thought it would be a good idea, to get some drama. Maybe he didn't even consult with anyone. He just thought, oh, this would be great for the show. And he's like, and that's out of character for him, perhaps. I don't know. I've only seen one episode. But he definitely didn't seem like that type of guy. When they got down to the confrontation part, he wasn't like, you freaking screwed with my wife. He was just like, okay, well, like, so it was very like, I don't know. I almost wonder if it was out of character. Like, he's not scrawny, because there were shots of him in their kitchen after, and I was like, this is a pretty tall dude who looks like he's pretty built. But at the same time, like, he doesn't seem like a crazy person. You know what I mean? That was crazy.
He doesn't seem like
behavior.
Mr. Stand Up for My Mouthy Wife, as he called himself.
Well, yeah, he doesn't seem like he goes to nightclubs and like inserts himself into beefs. You know what I mean? Like that's what most of these people come off as, right? Like, or at least the housewives do. You know, like they'd be like the kind of chick when we were like 22 who'd be screaming at a nightclub about something or throwing a drink on someone, you know.
I want to go back to what you said about this maybe being for the show, because I feel like it's maybe not for the show in the sense that he thought that this was going to add like narrative value or help drive and move the season forward. I feel like most of the men on Salt Lake City, at least, are kind of hands off when it comes to that sort of thing. But the idea that it's for the show in terms of how he wants to be seen within the eyes of the audience and how he would like to be presented, I think that that's probably true. I feel like this was out of character for
production
him.
Was involved. I didn't get that vibe. Like, it didn't feel fake. I'll say that. It felt like something he might have just decided on a whim to do, you know?
I think that this all happened because Lisa dragged them into this, right? Like Lisa was blowing up on Whitney at the end of the previous episode, and she was like, now I'm going to go talk to Justin and make him react, and then if Justin reacts, well, then John's going to have to react. Like, this is Lisa just trying to escalate it by dragging the husbands into it. They didn't want to be part of this, but Lisa is like, okay, you are now.
Fight my boyfriend.
It's just part of her like escalation process.
Anything else stand out to you in terms of the presentation of this, Dylan?
I one scene that like really also stood out for me, I guess, in the way it's presented, was Bronwyn and Todd eating in their little plexiglass bubble.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and part of that is just that's like one of the worst legacies of COVID for me, is just like convincing people that it's like cool to eat in a plexiglass cabinet like next to a road.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought those two up.
yeah. I mean, we had to, but that giving us the image of being like encased in your own little plexiglass bubble is like a good image of like so much of what's going on in the show, of everybody in their own little bubbles. Whether it's like the religious bubble that we see when we get that very Mormon scene of everybody doing their little fireside chat or whatever the hell it was.
Singing hymns.
Yeah. Or like, you know, Bronwyn in her little world, and Lisa in her little world, and everybody being in their own little bubbles where they can kind of see through the plexiglass but aren't really connected to each other. That introducing that image was, I thought, useful. It wasn't necessarily an aesthetically pleasing moment. Like, I don't believe Bronwyn when she's like, oh, this is so cute. No, it's not. It's like a really hideous setup, but it gives us a good image to like keep in our mind through the rest of the episode.
Dan, anything stand out about the presentation of this for you?
Yeah, and I don't mean to be rude, but the note that I made was Bronwyn's husband is old.
It's
balls.
okay. They're not listening.
Well, yeah, no, but I laughed so hard.
Now you're bursting my bubble.
I laughed so hard because they sit down at the table. I'm like, oh, this woman, like, based on the intro like view that they show, you know how they do their little like pose next to their name. I was like, oh, she seems pretty young looking. And then she sat down with her husband. And then I realized that she's not that young. Like, their ages are probably a lot closer than I initially thought. But he gives off such like classic old white man vibes. It's so funny. Like, he ordered seared salmon. You know, she got a pizza. He's like, I'll take the salmon, you know, and like, it just, he seemed though, like, I started to like him by the end of the conversation. Like, he doesn't seem like an idiot. He's not just fawning over her. Like, it seems like they have kind of an equality to the way that they talk to each other. Like, you know, I was actually like, yeah, this seems like a decent relationship on this show, you know?
I'm just going to say, just jump in there to say that I really disliked Todd in this episode. I think this is we haven't seen a ton of him yet. Part of it was just that I don't like the way that he doesn't use his knife in his left hand while he's eating. Maybe this is a very minor complaint, but he's eating that seared salmon the way a child does, just hacking off chunks with his fork and shoveling them towards his mouth. Very childish behavior.
He has no pizza experience.
The fact that he has to travel all over the world for work and his hobby is collecting Starbucks mugs is like the lamest thing a human women could do. Like collecting fridge magnets is like collecting rare tapestries and shrunken heads compared to being like, I went to the Starbucks in South Korea. Like this.
Congratulations. There's business centers everywhere you go.
Yeah. This guy just seems really lame and boring on like, first glimpse, that don't know him very well yet. One of the only like direct statements he says is when he straight up says these people are kind of despicable human beings, which is like, okay, buddy, you might calm down there. Like what?
I felt like on some level he was the closest to normal out of anyone on the show, and it's because
if that's normal,
he's boring.
that normal sucks. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like he was just what you would expect from going for lunch with your grandpa. He just stared at the table for a long time and ate his salmon. And then it was like she's talking at him about all this drama, and he's like, yeah. I'm just trying to get the salmon in my mouth without missing,
yeah. Unaware that you're allowed to use your second head while you're eating. Just like, let me concentrate. I've got to get this in my mouth.
South Korea, they tie your left hand behind your back.
Yeah.
But he works out of New York. What's his job anyway?
I don't know. I don't think
have they said? I don't know.
No.
Are they like a fresh couple on the series or something? Or?
Yeah, Bronwyn is brand new on the show.
Okay, because she is like, I feel like she's everything they've been looking for. Like the clothing she wears, the 6 dogs, the blue kitchen, and she doesn't even cook. Like, she seems like the perfect candidate for this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Although I did laugh.
Seems like if you could lab design a housewife, she's what you would come up with.
Yeah,
she kind of looks lab designed too, in a way.
Yeah,
and partially is. I mean, what is she on her third nose? I think she said. But also, I love the way that she seems to be desperate to try to like inject a very dorky idea of like eccentricity into like their relationship. Be like, I dressed up as a pig to pick you up at the airport. Oink oink. Kids, and everybody's like, don't talk to me.
I can get behind that super hard because he is so the opposite of that, and the fact that she gets such a charge out of surprising him in ways that are like super unattractive and awkward. I think that's fantastic. Like for an older guy to have a trophy wife that does silly stuff. I think that's really cute almost. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a great dynamic to have instead of like constantly.
It's funny because when I was watching
this
this scene, it like really resonated with me because we're taping this on Friday and yesterday was Halloween, and I went to pick up my son from school yesterday, and I was the only parent there in a costume. Like I was dressed as a giant hot dog, and nobody would make eye contact with me. So then later that night, I'm watching.
You're like,
this
it's
episode.
couture.
Yeah. But I'm watching this, and nobody in the airport wants to give her the time of day, and I was like, oh my god, this is what I looked like. It was like I was looking in the mirror.
I love that she even went up to like young people and tried to talk to them and stuff. Like, this is so funny. Yeah, I can respect that quite a bit.
Yeah, just trying to get a reaction out of somebody, and everybody's just like, I'm here to pick up my luggage. I'm not.
One scene that I wanted to mention, when Lisa, I think it was, the one that freaked out at the beginning, went for lunch with her sister and showed up wearing a leather jacket with baggy leather pants. I was just like, this is so Jersey it hurts. Like, I don't even know how she ended up in Salt Lake City, but this is hilarious.
I really like this scene because Lisa's sister, her manner of speaking and the phrases that she used were so similar to Lisa. Like, if you close your eyes, it sounded like it was just Lisa talking. I really like that she was kind of using her sister as a reflection as well. She was talking about how she is insecure about whether or not she's a good mother. And yeah, I really liked this scene where she seemed like she was able to use her sister as this reflection and really kind of dive deep into her insecurity.
I bet you from a family of 6, that's a very real insecurity that she would have. Not like something she's just saying either, like I don't know what their home life was like. I imagine it probably wasn't that bad if there were 6 of them, and they're all rich now. But like, you know, it maybe they didn't feel like they got enough attention from one or both of their parents. You never know.
Do you have a quote that stood out to you, Dan?
I didn't write one down specifically, but I would say that the moment that stuck out the most to me was when, I think it was Heather was her name, the blonde lady that got invited over to Bronwyn's house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When made that like rude remark about the dogs pooing wherever they wanted.
Yeah.
I laughed so hard. I can't remember what the wording was though. I wish I'd written it down. I remember just thinking like, she's like, she invites me here and, you know, to talk about shit, and now there's dogs shitting everywhere. Basically like something along those lines. And I was like, that's hilarious. And that's also like, you know, I love dogs. I know lots of people who have dogs that are great owners, but that's, you know, one of the things that comes with 6 dogs is they're going to eventually go to the bathroom, because she can't possibly be walking each of them individually every day, like 4 times a day. Like they're going to, eventually that house is just going to become a dog toilet, you know?
Let's get into our highlights. Dylan, what were your highlights here?
Since you just brought it up, Dan, that's the way that we ended on that scene of Heather visiting Bronwyn in her house. That was great. That was a great scene for me. I really liked their argument. I really like how neither of those women are like ceding an inch of ground. I thought there was like a really interesting kind of confrontation where they're both kind of still trying to get to know each other on this show, or they're both kind of trying to like get their feet settled and like and draw the battle lines. And I just thought that they were both very tenacious, while also like trying to like use very like reasonable lines of dialogue and stuff. And I thought it just came off really well, and was a really tense and interesting scene. The setting, of course, was great. She does live in the Dr. Seuss house to go with her Dr. Seuss outfits. It's goofy as hell, and also I think Heather's showing like really good strategy in that point too, just in the way that she shows up dressed like very casually too. Like Heather shows up wearing like a sweatshirt and jeans, knowing full well that Bronwyn, as always, is going to be dressed like she's hosting an Australian children's program called like the Wazza Woodle Gang or something.
Are you drunk?
Like she knows full well that that's like Bronwyn's whole thing. And since they're both kind of going at this being like, well, I'm just trying to be real, you know, I'm just trying to be straight and direct and honest with you, that like visually somebody's going to look more real than the other person, right? Like Heather knows that she's creating a contrast, a visual contrast, by dressing in a way that makes her coded like normal, real life, comfortable. This is me. I'm just chilling every day, wearing my jeans and sweats kind of look.
Well, and let's not forget,
try to
earlier
get
in
the advantage as the relatable one.
Aesthetically,
Bronwyn was like wearing that James Bond like pull the thing and it builds like a full inflatable structure around you when they went for that walk together. So like the contrast, like Dylan's saying, is huge, you know?
Yeah, like while we have that conversation, we get a clip to a confessional of Bronwyn saying, "I'm not giving Heather a phony version of myself," but she says that while she's dressed the way like Bugs Bunny would dress, pretending to be a flamenco dancer while he tries to seduce Elmer Fudd. Like so that the aesthetic contrast is like very sharp between two people saying like, "I'm just being me, I'm just being straight," when one person is clearly wearing costumes the whole time.
Yeah,
so I think that was really very smart of Heather. I think she thought of that and intentionally like wore like the most normie clothes possible to create that aesthetic contrast in the viewer's mind. And I thought that was just one of a series of like very smart moves by Heather, who I thought was really on her game this episode.
I would also argue that Bronwyn was very like almost out of line with the way she handled that. She like invited her over to squash the beef, and instead of squashing the beef, she's like, "I'm planning a trip," and you're like, "Not on the list right now." I'm like, that's not really leaving an opening to squash the beef.
Which I think is good play by Bronwyn. I think Bronwyn's playing it well.
Yeah.
I think she's been doing a good season. But what I appreciate by Heather is that Heather is really intent on drilling down to point those things out, right? To Heather's like right away being like, okay, so you've invited me here to dance for my dinner. Then I'm going to just bear exactly what you're doing. Like I'm going to make it very clear what you're doing for everybody watching right now. Heather's being very tenacious and trying to expose everything Bronwyn's doing in the most stark terms so that it's very obviously calculated. So I think they're both actually like sparring at a fairly high level in that dialogue. That's what I appreciate.
I do agree that they both had a pretty good like exchange here, and I like that they weren't, giving up any ground. I'm a bit disappointed that they weren't able to at least come to enough of a truce that Heather's able to go on this trip, because I would like to see this continue. And I think that cast trip environment is a really good place for that to take place. So yeah, a little disappointed that is going to lead to her not being on this trip and us not seeing this storyline extend into the core of the season with that cast trip. My immediate emotional gut reaction was that Heather is trying to frame herself as a victim, and it just didn't resonate with me because honestly I just don't really like Heather that much. But I think you make a good point about this. If I am able to take myself out of my emotional reactionary response to seeing Heather, that it is good gameplay.
I will say Heather kind of earned my respect in I think it was the scene 1 or 2 before that when they're at the Mormon party and old lips and Botox face starts tearing into her. And
who are you? I am from ancient Greece.
I was like, yeah. And I was like, I was kind of like, what is this lady showing up to her party and then starting beef with her over, and it felt really catty and silly. She's like, I remember Heather in high school, and she always wanted to sit with the popular girls, and it's just yeah, but look at you now. You know what I mean? You're literally a human mess, and she's just standing up for herself. You know what I mean?
I disagree. I think that Angie really nailed Heather's motivation. Heather really wants to be seen as the popular person. She wants to be the fan favorite, and she'll do whatever she can. That's why she's out there always repeating her her catchphrase from the past season, it's going out of fashion.
What's her catchphrase?
It's receipts, proof, timelines. It just got a really good edit last year in the finale where they added gunshots underneath each thing that she was saying in order to really have it make an impact. And the fan base went wild for it. But now she's just repeating it over and over and over and over again anywhere she can. She uses it in her tagline anytime, any presser, she's going to try to find an excuse to say it. And it's
trying to build
really
a brand.
lame. And I think that what Dylan has articulated on past episodes, that Heather's lameness is something that she brings to this show. That is something that we can appreciate. But I think that Angie really nailed the motivation that Heather has, and she does want to be, the popular one at all costs.
This is the part that kills me, though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, no, I do think that I agree with Craig that Angie's completely right. I think that's a big part of Heather's personality, and I do think that's one of the things that I find most interesting about Heather, because it is such a big part of her personality, and that was the right context to bring that up in, because that was in this very Mormon thing, and Heather, despite being a Reformed Mormon, is one of the things that is part of her brand now, is still clearly extremely attached to the Mormon church and being a good Mormon and all this stuff. So in that situation, I thought that was kind of the right read of Angie's, because you really see Heather just slinking back into that chair, and just when they start all singing together and doing their dorky Mormon shit, she's so in her zone, she just slips back into that. Yeah. Into that good Mormon, I know the rituals. And she says something I just want to stand up and start leading the fireside just like old times. That's such a part of her personality, and that kind of gives her a vulnerability and also a sense of understanding of her motivations that I thought really came through in that scene. And just while we're on the subject, I just want to say that I also really liked the metaphor that Heather uses to explain that when she says it's your first apartment. I don't want to live in my first apartment ever again. But of course, I have really positive nostalgic associations with it, because that was when I was younger and happier, and I have all that happiness which is attached to that. That's the way she uses to describe her feelings towards the Mormon church. Of course, she has so much nostalgic attachment, so much happiness associated with that, but I don't want to live there anymore. I thought that was a really great metaphor, the first apartment metaphor, to kind of describe that feeling. So I just thought that was a great way of summarizing that thing, which is so core to her character, which is so Heather.
I gotta say, two things stood out to me in this whole scene. The first one, I will say, it was when Angie showed up with a bottle of wine. I laughed super hard because she knows like they don't drink, but she's like, I've seen that bitch drinking wine like all the time, so she can like suck on this reality. Although I
appreciate that for Angie because again, that's one of those things where it's like their relationship with alcohol is so weird. They're all like, we don't drink as Mormons, but we see them drink all the time. So I like that.
We own tequila brands.
Like I always see you drinking, so I just thought it'd be fine to bring you wine. Like
they gotta be like those Mormon wives that just pound a Stanley Cup full of Mountain Dew all day.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say the other thing that stood out to me in this scene is like this is classic like popular crowd behavior, right? Like condemn one of you that you're mad at for whatever reason for all of the things that you already are. You know what I mean? She just wants to be the center of attention. That's like her goal. It's like, lady, you're on a show called The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Obviously being the center of attention is super important to you as well. Like all of them are like Lisa freaking out at the start, like the one that was like, don't pour the shit down the sink. Like they're all people who crave the spotlight. So it's super funny that when they turn their back on someone or when they're no longer interested in someone, they like project all of these things that they also feel in the fight and like the confrontation with them. Like it's hilarious to me to say that one of them wants the spotlight. Like, and maybe she does, or maybe she's just trying to build a brand or whatever, make it keep paying when she's not on the show anymore. But at the end of the day, they're all doing that, right? Like that's the name of the game.
That's so human behavior, though, right? Is that the things that annoy you most about other people are the things that you see in yourself that you don't like about yourself, right?
Yeah, humans are the worst. Totally. I will say though that Mort is a gem. Seems
Mort,
like
his
nice
way of
guy.
speaking is so interesting. Like Mort was a very interesting figure,
and then
I could listen to him talk about pickleball all night.
I love that he's like, and she would beat me like 60% of the time. Or something.
Give her the whole
like just so you don't think that I was losing all of the time. Like I want you to know I was still winning a decent amount of the time. It was close to equal.
And then when he dropped it, he's like, they dated or when his daughter's like, they dated for 6 days and then they got married. I was like, whoa, like that is impulsive.
Also, we get a little tiny snapshot of when he's like mentioning his family and they're like all dressed up the same way and they look to be a singing group like the Osmonds. And I was just I had this moment where I was like, is this every Mormon family? Are they all the Osmonds? Do all of them have to form singing groups with like matching suits? Is this just like a family ritual they all go through?
How many sequins died for that outfit? For all those outfits.
Is the Osmonds like the only one that broke through so we don't realize that every family does that and only one of them actually made it like work on a national stage?
I was going to say one of my highlights for this episode was the dog kicking its neck while Bronwyn and Heather were having their confrontation on the couch. Yeah. Like the editor clearly left the frame wide enough to have this dog just hammering its own neck. Like for a while, like.
Any other highlights from this, Dan?
The things I highlighted were Mort. You know what? I would say I said the John sucking at parallel parking, the dog kicking its neck. Although one thing I thought was really funny, and this is something that kills me about a lot of stuff that is not scripted, right? So people make mistakes in their speech, and that's fine. And it just for some reason it drives me crazy. And so when was it Justin is the other husband that got in the fight? When he's talking to his wife, she's like, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I guess I'll just be as direct as I possibly can with him. And then proceeded to say the most vague thing in the world.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I'm going to say that I'll be super direct with him. And I don't know, maybe just
say that sounds good.
Yeah.
Like, what? That wasn't direct at all. You just threw that out there. I also wrote down gorgeous mountains feels like they don't have any trees. So I don't know. That's more about the terrain. That's a topographical analyzation of.
Yeah, no, it is remarkable in Salt Lake City. Whenever they show like drone shots of the city, it's always like, wow, this like the surrounding mountain chains looks beautiful, and the actual city looks like extremely boring.
Yes, yeah. And you can imagine what they're paying for those houses right next to those mountains.
Any other highlights, Dan?
Oh, no. The other highlight that I had. This was the other highlight. I don't know how I missed this when we were talking about the fight at the very beginning of the episode. Lisa's screaming, freaking out, going up to everyone at the party, being like, "She's a liar!" And then they're like, okay, linked hands for a prayer. And then, and then they do. I'm like, what? You could have linked hands with anyone here, and you went right back to her, and then like, okay, like it's
Mary forced it to.
Mary forced it, yeah.
It's just, okay. Well, maybe I missed that part. Oh my God. I was like, this is so silly. And then like, what's her face leaves immediately. I'm like, so I guess licking hands didn't work. So.
Yeah. Who are your stars from this episode, Dan?
I think Justin was like, he won me over completely, just the way he handled himself. He does not come across as a psycho. He's not an impulsive loser from what I've seen. I've only seen one episode with him in it. And I really got a kick out of Bronwyn. I think she's a good fit. If she's new for the show, I think she makes a lot of sense on the show, because as Dylan mentioned, she looks like she lives in Dr. Seuss's world, Yeah. She's very extra, as the youth might say. So I think she's a good fit. I just find it so funny that her husband is just like, everyone's dentist. Like, he's just not that exciting. He's a nice guy, it seems, but he's just like, he's like a guy who looks close to 70. He's just tired with life, talking all the time, I thought she was really entertaining.
Dylan, who are your stars here?
I think my first star is not going to be a big surprise. I think, as everybody listening can tell at this point, one of our biggest divides on this show between me and Craig is that I think Heather's really fascinating and awesome, and Craig loathes Heather, which is great. I can't wait to keep hashing this out. But I thought Heather had a great episode. I really did. I thought she was really speaking very precisely. She was really using her words, really using her mind. She was put into a lot of quarters in this episode and was really kind of fighting her way through strategically. I really liked the way she reacted to Angie coming at her, and the way she came off as sympathetic but not sycophantic towards Lisa, and like really managed to dodge the questions while using phrases that seemed like direct enough that it seemed like she was being clear spoken and level headed. Like she's using her phrases well, and she's fighting well. I thought I like when she sits down with Brittany and they're like, wow, that was crazy what happened at the party last night. And Heather's like, yeah, it was crazy what happened between Lisa and Whitney. And Brittany's like, no, between me and Jarrett. And Heather's like, oh, right. Yeah. The only thing you ever talk about.
Yeah.
Sure. We're going to talk about that, of course. And then straight up tells Heather that she's acting crazy, or it tells Brittany that she's acting crazy, that she's in a toxic relationship, but does it in a way where she still manages to not just like make Brittany say fuck you and storm out, but like actually like sit there and listen to her and like remain in the friendship. I thought that was just another example of Heather actually that was using her words really well. And I thought she had a huge episode. Again, loved that like first apartment metaphor, which gives us more of her psychology. Great stuff, I thought. First star. Second star, I mean, I guess it's going to have to be Bronwyn, because she also is a total goof, dressed like a crazy person. Good for her. And just like we've mentioned a lot of times, that's just slipped right into the show. Yeah. And third star, it's tempting to give it to Lisa, who didn't have a lot, but still had like great Lisa moments. Like when she says she's going to have to beg me to ever even look at her again, and then takes a big sip of the big gulp. That was like a classic like Lisa moment. But I'll give it to Mort instead. Let's give it to Mort. Yeah. Let's get Mort on the podium.
I'd also like to echo that Dylan, when he mentioned that Heather had a good edit, I felt like for someone coming into it cold, they were trying to paint her as the desperate, like, I want to be popular girl, but she really stood up for herself in a lot of situations and didn't just fold to whatever the popular girls were saying, right? Like she seemed like a strong, independent type.
Yeah, I think considering the way that she was painted into a lot of corners, I thought she like fended for herself very ably.
Yeah, I think some of the walls closing in on Heather are of her own creation, but I agree that she did well fending for herself, in that situation here. She's going to be my number one star as well here, despite the fact that I had a emotional reaction to her performance in that final scene. I think sprinkled throughout this episode, especially the scene that we got between her and Brittany, the scene at the fireside as well. I think she she did have a really compelling episode. And yeah, we didn't talk about that scene at Beauty Lab very much, but when Brittany is trying to like frame her relationship with Jared in these really positive terms and being like, well, haven't you ever had a relationship like that? Haven't you experienced a love like that? And Heather just says, yeah, I've been in a toxic relationship, and immediately reframes it. And Brittany's like, well, what did you do? And Heather says, I fucked up my life. It really is just such a good back and forth between them. I think it showed Heather's experience at this. So yeah, I agree. It pains me to give Heather number 1 star here, but she earned it here. Number 2,
welcome to Heather gang, Craig.
No, not
Stop
yet.
it.
I'm not
Get some
ready to
help.
come over to the Heather gang side. I still find her to be just like nails on a chalkboard. I think the desperation that she has to be the popular girl is something that really frustrates me. It's tough for me to watch. So I'm not ready to come over there yet, but I am coming around to the idea that she can be appreciated for what she brings to the show in a way that someone like Lisa Rinna is really tough for me to like watch and empathize with, but bring something to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in that case that I think is core to what that show is. So I'm open to receiving Heather for what she is, but I don't think I will ever truly love her.
Well, we'll get you Heather pilled yet.
Yeah. Hey, you got me fully on board with Louis in Jersey. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Then number 2, I also want to give it to Justin. I think that we saw him go through a lot of different phases of emotional reaction to this before like really tempering himself, and we got that like that lowering of the temperature from the very beginning where it's getting physical and they're so like John and Justin are so angry at each other, and quickly that kind of dissolves. We see the next scene where Justin's still angry and he's just like getting this anger out by dumping a bunch of alcohol down the drain. And then by the time that we get to see John and Justin together, they're basically completely over it. They're just hashing it out because they have to at this point. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting progression. I think 2B is also John, who we got to see new levels of lameness from him. Like, I don't think we've ever really got a full picture of what John Barlow is like. And to see him, it's interesting to me that we get a better picture of him when he's trying to step outside of his character and present himself as something that he's not. We see how truly like this like lame, uptight Mormon he is when he's trying to kind of present himself as something other than that. We can see all that true internal character that he has seeping out because he just can't be the person that he wants to be on camera. So I thought that was really interesting as well.
He probably can't parallel park a car the way he'd like to either. So,
and then number 2, I'm going to give it to Bronwyn. Oh,
that's your
I'm
third
on
number
3.
2, Craig.
Number 2C is going to go to Bronwyn, and number 2D is going to go to Angie. All right. Okay, let's get into Real Housewives of New York. Before we do that, though, I just want to take the opportunity to get everyone to hit like and subscribe on whatever platform they are watching this on. Check out on screen right now, we've got our toll-free number where you can leave your take. Let us know what you're thinking about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Real Housewives of New York. If you're listening audio only, it'll be in our show notes. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to read it out, and you don't have a pen and paper next to you to copy it down anyways. So check the show notes or check the screen right here, right below me. It's right here. It's flashing.
It's spinning around. It's doing all kinds of crazy effects that take lots of time to render. Look at this.
We used to do that to Craig back in the day on Week Thus Far.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Gotta get a piece of broccoli in my left hand, please.
Oh my God. Let's dive into Real Housewives of New York. Dan, you said you were not as big a fan of this. Do you want to give us a summary of what happened?
So I wrote 2 3-word summaries of this, and then I'll do like a real summary. But the 3-word summary that I wrote initially was emotional birthday party. And then the second one I wrote was, this was boring. So, like, you know,
Emotional birthday party is my favorite Midwest emo band.
I think there's probably been a lot of emotional birthday parties on these shows over the years. So it starts off with, I can't remember her name, but she was dressed like Michael Jackson shopping for plants. And she was talking about, she was going to put her mom's ashes in the ground and whatever, because they were in a bag in her closet and all that. And you know what? This felt very real because I know lots of people who've had that problem. They lose a parent, they receive the ashes. It's such a difficult emotion to deal with that they put them somewhere and then they just kind of leave it because they don't want to come back to it, because confronting it is actually very difficult. And later on in the episode, when they do bury the ashes, they kind of pull up a tree, put the ashes into the ground, and then put the tree back. I thought it was a really nice moment and a really nice ceremony they had. I actually made the note that, where is it? Something along the lines of, like, I'll have to find it afterward, but I said it was nice to see real people on this show, like having real emotions and not just like talking themselves up and being fake and all that stuff. But like they were actually shedding some tears and they were struggling and it felt very real for a show like this. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel put upon.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I have to give these shows credit is I don't really think that there's too much producer meddling. I think a lot of it probably happens in post. I think a lot of the storylines come together afterward. If I had to guess, I don't know, of course, but that one felt pretty real. And I think a moment like that probably wouldn't happen or would have been weird if a producer had been involved in trying to amp it up. You know what I mean? And then most of this episode felt like it was birthday party planning and then the birthday party. And I got to say, like, I wrote one thing down. It always blows my mind how grandiose these people treat their birthdays. Like their birthday is somehow a favor to society. Like they're like, oh, I have to do XYZ for my birthday because if I don't, then, you know, like we won't have any tax income for the year. Like it just doesn't make any sense, you know, how like a person can be in their 40s and be like, oh, every birthday has to be perfect. And it reminds me of like human beings who lived without consequence, who always got what they wanted, who probably had parents that were millionaires and were just like, do anything you please, you know. And now that you're 40, you're this absolute monster when it comes to planning your birthday party, right? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Dylan,
I think that's kind of what it all funneled to, though. Like, that's why I kind of felt like not a lot happened. It was like spreading ashes, planning a birthday, and then this big birthday where they confront each other. 2 of them confront each other, and one of them changes clothing.
If you had a birthday party and spread ashes, you'd probably consider that a pretty busy day, though, right?
Oh yeah, but that wasn't the same. That wasn't the same person, though, right?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Dylan, what stood out to you in terms of how this was presented?
Okay, off the bat, I really like Sai's storyline, like Dan mentioned, right? I think we've been given this idea that Sai's doing personal growth since the start of the season. We haven't really seen that yet, aside from her like going into like an ice bath at one point. But in this episode, we actually get to see that, and we actually have good images of that. The fact that we start off, like you mentioned, Dan, with her shopping for plants because she wants to start a garden, which is clearly something that is new to her. So we have this image right away of like trying to grow something, of being patient, of taking time to like grow your own things rather than just going out to the store and getting the instant gratification of buying them. And that, you know, growth metaphor with plants dovetails right away into her, you know, having the storyline with her mom's ashes, which are going to feed a plant, tree. And that very good image, which you touched on, Dan, of having your mom's ashes in the closet because it's something that you don't want to think about, that you're having a hard time dealing with it, you're having a hard time integrating that into your life. So it's in the closet, it's hidden, it's in your house, but you're trying not to look at it, you're trying to keep it away, and her trying to to bring herself to transfer her mom from the closet into the ground, where it's going to feed a plant, where it's going to be part of this process of growth that she's trying to tap into, this idea that she's trying to be patient and learn to grow something slowly with roots that are connected to where she came from and what she actually is and what her history is and all that, and trying to learn to have a way to incorporate her mom, who we've learned from last season she had a very difficult relationship with, it tried to learn to incorporate that into her growth process. So we really get like these rich metaphors for Sai's attempts to become a better person, I guess, to try to grow and be more patient and be more connected and not hide parts of her past, parts of herself, but try to learn to integrate them into ourselves. So that's great stuff. It starts off really strong, I thought, with that, and I really like how that all plays out.
Was Sai the one
I agree. I
wearing
thought that this was like so thematically rich here. The fact that we see, like you said, this idea of planting and growth be this strong theme. We're also balancing this idea of kind of calm versus noise and chaos. And in that opening scene, we hear Sai talking about how she doesn't feel safe if she doesn't hear sirens and fuck you every minute. This going out into the country, something that is new to her. I thought it was really fantastic.
Was she the one with the gold chest plate in the one-on-ones? Yeah.
Yeah.
Looked like a World of Warcraft item or Diablo 2,
Dan, what quote stood out to you?
Okay, so I laughed super hard. She goes, "How have you not seen Clueless?" Because my girlfriend was watching it with me, and she goes, "Yeah, how have you not seen Clueless?" And honestly, how have you not seen Clueless?
You haven't seen Clueless, Craig?
I haven't seen Clueless. No.
Dan, have you seen Clueless? Yeah. Go watch. Clueless is good. It's really good.
It's a good movie, but yeah,
it is.
I'm sure it is. There's lots of good movies I haven't seen.
That's one
I
of them.
haven't seen that one either.
Favorite quotes? I'd say probably that. I laughed really hard at "It's fat with a P" because it felt non-ironic. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't tell. I'm like, is this ironic?
I assumed that was a quote.
Yeah, she's trying to tap into the '90s vibe of a Clueless party, I think.
Okay, and then I'd say the number one quote of this episode, I think, was in a flashback. But it was, "I can't believe you sold our Bitcoin."
Yeah.
She's like, "We needed that." I'm like, "For what? Like, what are you hiring hits on the dark web? Like, just cash it out, lady. Like, what is your problem in this situation?" Oh man. Oh, I also thought it was really funny. "Oh, she's a little pigeon toed. You know what? You need local honey."
That was
fix
great.
Your feet.
That was honestly. So I think maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I do think like Brynn is kind of coming off as a bit of a villain in this episode. But that is one moment where the editors really had her back, and it was really funny. Where Brynn's like, this Rebecca is honestly boring as hell, and then we get a great montage of her being boring as hell, being like, what you need is local honey. This headband. The problem is that it makes my nose look big. But what else does she say? She says, the pigeon toe thing. It's just like a really good on point like montage of a few moments of her just seeming like the most boring person at this party. So that was one moment where the editors are like, okay, we got to back Brynn up on this one, like because yes, she is boring.
You know what was also a really great moment was when they're at the birthday party and one of those women's like, "I'm a Cancer," and the other one's like, "I'm a Cancer too." I'm like, I'm sure lots of people have described you that way as well.
Let's talk strategy. Were there any strategic decisions that stood out to you, Dan?
Like from an editor's perspective, or from just general?
In terms of gameplay, like social positioning, that sort of thing.
Oh well, obviously the confrontation at the birthday party was a big move. And I want to say, first of all, the woman that she was confronting, who's a little bit older, props for having some gray in her hair on a show like this. Like, I did not
Jenna
expect
Lyons?
that. Yeah, I totally thought everyone was going to be Botoxed and dyed up to the wazoo, or up the wazoo. You know what I mean? Like, I thought it was going to be... everyone's fake as hell. But you know, she seems like a very real looking person. I thought that was an interesting dynamic that she brought to the party by dressing up like the dad, because it gave her higher status than everyone else in just that party. And then when the confrontation happened, she was like, "Oh yeah, I don't know what you're talking about," you know. And so it felt like that. The way that the edit went, the woman who was confronting her, it felt like she didn't have any real ammo. Like, and whether or not that's true,
Erin,
when she's like, you know, you did this and you did that, and she's like, no, you're just like, you know, misconstruing things, and like it felt like she was the one that was desperate in that situation, just by the way that they edited it. And then when it came out, like the thing she was confronting her out of was just, it felt so stupid. Like she's like, oh, I was always like on your team, and I was always like, you know, on your side. And then I just felt like I wasn't. Like I can't remember the full detail there, but it felt very limp. Like the whole argument came out, and I was like, that's it. Like, you know, this whole
it's not
thing
like Jenna sold your
that.
Bitcoin or anything.
I felt like that the girl or the woman who confronted her got a real villain edit though on
Erin?
this episode for sure.
Okay, so I thought that this was a really interesting thing because, as I was watching this initially, up until the very end of this conflict, I was like, what the hell is Erin even upset about? Like, I can't make heads or tails over why she has an issue with Jenna. And then when we got the discussion between Jenna and Erin, it was that Erin isn't mad at Jenna. She's mad at Brynn.
Yeah,
like, that's who she's actually angry at, and she wants to use this as a way to drive a wedge between Jenna and Brynn, because she's already put to bed the issue that she has with Brynn. Like one of the things that we've talked about and has been pointed out this season is that Brynn likes to put conflicts to bed and then find new ones where she's got better footing. She has successfully done this with Erin. They have resolved their issue. So Erin doesn't feel like she's got any justification to be upset with Brynn, but she's still obviously harboring resentment. So she's trying to start a fight with Jenna over this really nebulous idea of whether or not she's being a good friend or not. Like there's really nothing concrete there, but she wants to engage in like a dialogue with Jenna where she has the opportunity to convince her that Brynn is the problem, and she's laying the groundwork here for that. And we see that at the end where she's telling Jenna that, you know, Brynn is embellishing things and that she's like jealous and opportunist and that she's the problem. And I was like, oh, that's what's going on. She's not mad at Jenna. That's why it doesn't make any sense. This conflict doesn't make sense, but she wants to have a way to express to Jenna how she feels about her relationship with Brynn. So I thought that was really interesting. I feel like this is not a very well calculated move. Like, I don't think that she put a lot of thought into this. I think she was just going with her gut. She was like, this is like subconsciously what she's doing. But I thought it was interesting. And I think that the strategic decision that was maybe a mistake here was Brynn leaving Jessel's party, because she allowed this conversation to take place where she's not able to manage it. It feels like tan. You know.
Do you expect her to just not go to her spray tan appointment that she just made, Craig? Come on. You can't ask the impossible.
They had a 9:40 available.
Yeah. In chess terms that Brynn will understand, I feel like that's a blunder.
It felt like the confrontation was like when you dump like you ever see that video of the raccoon who stole cotton candy and then tried to wash it and it all disappeared. Like it just the second she brought her argument into the light of day, it all just melted away and was like, oh, it turns out you don't really have a problem with her.
That was really fun. And that's also the way Jenna handles it too, right? Like Jenna is, and it is amazing that she shows up dressed as Dan Huen and like refuses to drop the bit, refuses to put down the phone. Like it's just completely fixated on keeping this prop giant cell phone on her ear at all times, just like hyper focused on playing this character at all times, which is hilarious. And And like you said, it does give her a higher status role too. Like she does kind of have a higher status, like business person role within the like actual real world of the show. And she like manages to assume that by having a joke costume in the show. But you're right, Dan, she completely...
It was couture, actually, I think. I think it came across as couture.
I mean, it's not that different from the way she normally dresses, actually. She wears like neckties and oversized men's shirts all the time in her real life. So that's kind of just her wardrobe, rocking it. But you're right, Dad. She does seem to kind of dissolve the dispute. And I think the way she handles that it is part of... It's not just the fact that Erin handles it so badly, though it is partly that too. But it's like the way that Jenna is just always like, I'm not aware of any tension. I'm not aware of any problem. Is there something wrong with you? Because why don't you talk to me about it? Is just like really dissolves it. Also, Abe is such a terrible surrogate for Erin. He's worse at this than Erin is. And it's so funny how like Abe like tries to bring it up and then immediately just folds as soon as like Jenna like makes the slightest interrogation of what he's trying to say. He's just immediately like, I don't, did I say that there was, I didn't mean to say there's a tension. And Jenna's like, aren't you a lawyer? Like, why are you not good with speaking? But that was really good. And like you said, I felt like Erin was trying to like really make something happen, and it did just dissolve like the raccoon's cotton candy. That's spot on.
I have come around to Erin so much. I think that she does add a lot to this, and you know, it's in kind of a way like Shannon Bedore, where there's not a lot of calculation that is going on here, but the way that she's very like clumsily operating within the strategic landscape here, it just kind of works. It works for me. I think that, you know, she's emotionally reactive to everything that is going on, and I feel like she's a good addition.
Oh, someone like that on a show like this is a casting director's dream come true. A person who wears their emotions on their sleeve and gets upset at like the slightest things, you know, that's someone you're like, yes, they are gonna stir the pot like for us.
I think yes and no, because she is not going to ever be a fan favorite. Like there's not going to be legions and legions of Erin fans because she does come across as kind of boring. She doesn't get really favorable, relatable edits ever. I think it's great for the tension on these shows. It's like a Katie Maloney. There's not legions of Katie Maloney fans on Vanderpump Rules, but it just adds this like numb, droning tension to every scene that she's on, and I think it works. It works for me.
So I imagine some villains are beloved in the history of these shows, or
totally, yeah,
oh, absolutely.
And then some
what makes
are
a
just
good villain,
hated.
then? Like what compared to her?
Well, I think the thing is you can play it so many different ways. Like there's so many different ways to play a villain. I think Erin is honestly kind of a version of one of my favorite housewives, who is maybe the most hated housewife, is Teddi Mellencamp. I think that she was someone that is just like a little bit messy, doesn't really know what she's doing, but just like tightly wound and adds like this annoying tension to every scene that she's on. And the fan base is just so triggered by Teddi Mellencamp. I can see Erin going in that trajectory where people just hate absolutely everything she does because it's just so fucking annoying. Okay. And I love it. I love someone's ability to just get under people's skin just by being who they are.
I had to Google Teddi Mellencamp, but we found it. Yeah, I see what you mean, though. Yeah, you don't want a villain that is not just unlikable, but doesn't really have anything going on in their own right, in their own storyline. You know,
there's a certain level of sustainability that you have to have as a villain, because you can't just like go out in a blaze of glory and then not have any relationships the next season so that you can come back. Like you can't burn every single bridge. You just constantly need to be, you know, starting new fights, and sometimes you're involved in them, sometimes they're between others, sometimes you're just lying and manipulative, sometimes you're just, you know, there's so many ways to play it.
I think of The Office. Do you remember season 1 of The Office? Michael Scott was just unlikable. And then after season 2, he became the likable, inappropriate guy, right? Like, because there would always be a little piece at the end of an episode where he'd do something nice, or he'd show that he's kind to children, or that, there's always some little thing that he would do to kind of win you back afterward. And I feel like that probably makes a good villain. Like someone who does do the odd good thing, even though they're constantly annoying people.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to be have anything that really redeems yourself in order to stay on these shows, to be honest. Like, I think you can probably play just being straight villain without, risking your paycheck. But
Right.
it definitely helps to have a little bit of nuance.
End up with people leaving the show or not being brought back for a season? I imagine they're on like a year-to-year agreements probably, so they can keep fluctuating. Or
Yeah, so when you are like a full cast member, you want to make sure that you are showing some sort of element of your personal life that is kind of independent of what is going on socially within the group typically. But also you want to be involved in conflict, and not necessarily just conflict, but you want to be involved in the group dynamics in some way, and just be compelling on screen. If you're, ticking off at least, 2 of those boxes, then you're going to be brought back. If you're not really bringing anything, you could get downgraded to either a friend of or just not return back.
here's a question that takes it back to the episode we just talked about, the Salt Lake City one. Do you think Brynn is making a move, or Bronwyn is making a move to slowly push Heather off the show by not inviting her on a trip and all that kind of stuff?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she's got the position to do that, and I don't think that she. I think she knows that. I don't think Heather is at a risk of being kicked off the show at this point. I think she's done enough this season that she'll be back. She's got a big enough history with the show. I don't think that there's any risk of Heather not coming back. I'd be pretty shocked at this point if she didn't come back unless something big happens later this season.
Right. Okay.
Let's get into our highlights. Dylan, what were your highlights here?
We're talking about villainy, so I just want to reintroduce something that I just said a little bit earlier, barely highlight related. But do you think that Brynn is taking a villain turn in this episode? Do you think that she's moving into villainy at this point? Would you agree with that, Craig? Yeah, and
she's the one that left the party, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of like the capstone on it for me, right? Like I thought Brynn she's just getting as intense as we've ever seen her. She's really dialing it up. She always likes to make kind of mean comments to other people, especially Jessel. That's great. That's part of her personality. That's part of the fun of her. But she's really getting emotional and calling Sai a troll that lives under the Brooklyn Bridge and stuff. And I feel like there's been enough things that have been happening this episode where she's been misinterpreted, or her attempts to to be kind of big brained and tell people how they should present on camera, as we saw in the previous episode, have backfired and have shown that she's kind of overplaying her hand. She's been too confident, that she's at this point is kind of flailing a bit, and she's attacking a little bit more indiscriminately, and is kind of losing her grip on the narratives and is flailing out a bit. And I think that really came through in this. That was one of the most compelling parts about it to me. And the fact that she seems to very gratuitously insult Jessel at the end of the episode, which I think Brynn has always kind of taken it for granted that she can just insult Jessel as much as she likes, and Jessel's never going to take offense because Jessel's just too wishy-washy to do that. But I think this is another example of Brynn just pushing it too far, and just she seems to just decide that she's going to leave the party, openly insulting Jessel and removing herself from these conversations. And it just felt like the capstone of her surrendering ground and just turning into more of a kind of destructive presence in the show.
Is Jessel the one whose birthday party it was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the comment you're talking about was when she was saying I think your 3 outfit changes are lame or whatever, but I think it's awesome because you're crazy or
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things. Like when Jessel says she's going to do a Clueless party, Brynn's like, yeah, that's so suitable for you, Clueless, you know. But I mean, like that. But what I mean by the capstone insult is her just saying like, "Oh, I have a spray tan appointment. Look, it's on my phone. I gotta go. Bye." You know?
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I think she's absolutely. I don't really know her, but if I had to guess, she was already a villain. So, you know, that's definitely taken a turn.
Yeah, I think that this cast is still so new, and they all still are trying to like drive towards equilibrium. Like we see where Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, they're happy to be in very unstable and imbalanced positions where, you know, things are volatile and, you know, there's always someone that is not settled. But we talked a lot about this season how everyone on this cast wants to like shower their conflicts with love and try to get everything back into a settled position. Brynn is kind of bucking that. She's really causing conflict with everyone and being clumsy and messy and just I think she's totally I think she's definitely doing the heel turn this season and becoming a villain. I don't think that this is something that we're going to see her just be a villain for her entire time on this show. I think that it's a season-long villain arc, and then, you know, next season there's going to be new conflicts and she might take more of a backseat there and go back to the role that she has. If she's back, like there's ways that you can take this heel turn and become a villain, and like I said, it's unsustainable and you don't have the relationships at the end of the season in order to continue. Like we saw Monica's performance on last season of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. She was this very compelling character, and then there's one conflict at the end that she was unable to resolve at the reunion and not be able to persist those relationships, and no one wanted to have relationships with her, so she's off the cast. Ooh. That is definitely something that could happen to Brynn depending on how this conflict continues. If she just like continues isolating everyone and people being like, I don't want to work with Brynn, then it's possible that we see her not come back. I think that would be a shame because I liked what we saw from her last season. I think that is a really good look. And so far, I think she's doing a good job of being a villain. So let's see if she can strike that balance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's going to prevent Brynn from ever truly being frozen out from the rest of the group is that a lot of the strength from the various people in the group really comes from proximity to Jenna Lyons. I think there's still a lot of shuffling to try to be close to her. And I think Brynn knows that she can always kind of cozy up to Jenna when she wants to, just by being like flirty and vulnerable. And Jenna's always going to be like, oh, come over here, you're my pal. So I think knowing that she's always has a way to like get a shortcut to being like Jenna's friend is going to like stop her from actually being frozen out by everybody.
Yeah, that's a relationship that she needs to continue to maintain, though. She needs to make
like
sure
we
she
saw in the
doesn't break that trust, because we see that, you know, this relationship that she's got with Jenna is so important to Brynn in terms of like the power structure and the social structure here. But also this relationship that Jenna has with Brynn is really important to Jenna, and that's something that Brynn needs to keep feeding. Like that trust needs to remain intact, because we talked about in the Hamptons, you know, Jenna using this complicated dessert, although YouTube commenters told us that that's not actually that complicated to make. But still, she used this dessert that required a lot of attention. She used it as a social crutch. We see her do the same thing here with the costume, with the phone that she's using and the props. She's an introvert who looks for social crutches to in order to like find comfort and to help her operate within these social situations. Brynn is one of her social crutches right now. She is someone that she trusts. She's someone that she trusts to help her operate and maneuver here. And because she's able to like have playful banter with Brynn. So I think that this is a relationship that is equally as important to Jenna as it is to Brynn. And Brynn needs to make sure that she doesn't isolate herself.
Totally.
I believe it's Pavlova that you're talking about.
Pavlova. Yes, that's what I'm talking
Australian.
about. Let's talk. Did we go through everyone's highlights here?
There's a couple more that I'd probably mention. I thought the champagne at the clothing store was a wonderful illustration of the alternate reality that these people live in. They're going clothing shopping at like a Fendi store or something. Like, do you want us to pop a bottle of champagne? Like, oh yeah, why not? I'm just like, I've never had that experience in my life. Never had someone at Old Navy been like, you guys want to spend the afternoon here? Let me get you hammered. Like
that happens to me all the time when I go to Valley Village and they're like, hey, I got a couple of warm cans of Labatt Extra back here.
Those are from 1990. They came in with some stuff.
You guys need to have a champagne and Shein session. It sounds like.
I was also
always.
I bet you, like, with all the shit talking that was going on at the clothing store, I wrote down, I bet you their group chats and DMs must be the funniest shit in the world. Like, it's got to be just like constantly taking stuff the wrong way for the sake of it, or like choosing to fight with each other, or, you know, saying rude things about each other. I just thought it was super funny. And then also another thing I wrote down too was, so the woman whose birthday it was, you said her name was Jessel or something like that?
Yeah,
Jessel. What is her accent? Because I wrote down it sounded like New York plus England plus Moira from Schitt's Creek.
I don't know if where you're getting much New York out of that, but she's definitely
like,
English.
And then like this, you know, like Moira from, like you said, Schitt's Creek. It just felt really weird, you know, like there were a few words that she said where I was like, huh? You know, that's not even transatlantic. That's like something else.
Yeah, she's definitely British. Dylan, who are your stars here?
So first star Brynn, she was just the most interesting. She was going off. She was getting intense, and it's making great TV. Let's give a second star to Sai. I still feel like I'm not really seeing this like emotional growth she's talking about, but at least this episode we got that great metaphorical structure for it, and we got to see a lot of her family life. So we're getting a lot of interesting stuff from her too. Tempted to give a star to Ubah, who we haven't mentioned because she is a painter, and I thought a couple of the canvases they showed at first were actually, like, I thought really good. Some of the kind of rose ones with kind of electric colors, and then the more we see of them, I feel like the shittier they get. But I think she's got some interesting art going on there. It's another aspect to her, and it's you know, kind of an interesting contrast between her kind of you know, immigrant perspective of being like, this is all coming from me and my relationship to my world. I'm painting directly with my fingers, not even using a brush. It's me and the canvas, which seems very different from the approach that Sai's trying to take to her well-being and being like, I'm trying to learn how to be more connected and grow things and take my mom out of the closet and put her in the tree and all that stuff. There's a comparison to be made there that I thought's interesting. But instead, I'm going to give my third star to Mona May, who is the costume designer on the hit 1995 Amy Heckerling movie Clueless. Whose great costumes inspired everything everybody was wearing in this episode.
That's a very
also the costume designer on Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, Never Been Kissed, Night at the Roxbury, Wedding Singer. So a lot of what you think of as like 1990s like bubblegum pop aesthetic is coming from her costume design. So a little shout out.
I love that. Great. Yeah, tag her in the comments.
Yeah.
Those are great stars. Dan, how about you?
I thought Jenna, like being someone who came into this cold, I thought Jenna had the most like status energy, and I felt like she was kind of the most grounded. Maybe I'm totally out to lunch saying that in general, but I felt like she was the most with it and was the one that people were most impressed with, especially her costume choice, and then the one trying to confront her and then kind of fading and melting away. Like, what was the line? Like, I wrote down, like, it was super funny that she's like, oh, you know, I always loved you. I just don't want to be your friend anymore. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, you know? And she got to the bottom of that, like, quickly, just by being like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know? And that was a very real reaction that someone, I think, should have to a moment like that, where someone's calling you out, you can be like, what are you talking about? Like, especially if you don't know what they're talking about, if you're genuine about it. I also thought Brynn would be the second one because of the very similar reasons that Dylan gave. Like, she spiced up that party in a big way. Like, leaving to go get a spray tan is like exactly what I would expect from a show like this, like, and then everyone getting mad at her and her being like, I don't give a shit, like, it just like, I don't know why everyone's so mad, like,
like, yes, you do. You know exactly why.
As she's leaving, she's like, Irish exit. It's like, Irish exit is not where you tell everybody that you're leaving. Yes, right. It's not what an Irish exit is.
No, again, misusing phrases because they've just heard people say them, I would like to say, though, like, Ubah, I thought was an interesting, but not... Like, she's an interesting character, but I didn't find her interesting. So I felt like her story was compelling. She's from Ethiopia. She moved to America, became a model, built
to Canada,
a business.
apparently. I didn't know she was Canadian.
Oh,
Ubah's secret
okay.
Canadian. I didn't know that.
And she built a business, and then she's painting now. Though the thing that's hard for me to get on board with, though, is like what she's describing as hard work probably was hard work, but it's also a lot like winning the lottery. You know what I mean? Like yes, you moved from a difficult situation, but you were also naturally beautiful enough to be paid for the way you look, which is probably a dream for a lot of people. You just wake up in the morning and go get paid for being attractive. And then she's like, now I'm doing finger painting. And I'm like, this is exactly what happens when people get paid for being attractive. Like, I'm doing something anyone can do now. Let's all be proud of it. And it's like, all right, like Dylan said, some of them are decent, but some of them are just like mishmashes of color and stuff. I will say,
I do like Racquel's assessment there. Like, if you ask your friend who's in the art world to like give you their opinion on your work, and what they say is, in my opinion, there's no bad art. That is the worst thing they could possibly say. Like, they are spit roasting you right there.
Yeah. I like how the one piece that Racquel was interested in, like, that she thought was striking, was this like picture of the flag, and it's like
just the
asking
Jasper
Ubah
Johns
to speak.
knockoff, really.
And Ubah gives like just the most like literal interpretation of it possible. There's not a ton of nuance to it. Like, obviously it's really personal, it's expression, it's art. Yeah, but like Racquel's definitely like looking for a little bit more here, and Ubah's just like, well, it's gold because when I look at the country, I see gold. Yeah.
No, yeah, that was funny. Though, to dial it back a bit, I do, like I said, I do think some of the pieces were really interesting, and everybody should try to express themselves through art. So I don't want to art shame Ubah too much here.
I loved her friend's dress with the jean pants on top of them, though. Like, did you see that? Did you notice that at all? Like, her friend, when she came over to the apartment, had a frilly dress on that had the top layer of jeans sewn on to the front of it. So like, it was like a dress with jeans on top of it. And I thought that was amazing. Yeah. And probably very expensive if I had to guess, but that was amazing.
My star, my number one star, I think I'm going to give it to Brynn, just for all the reasons that we mentioned. 2 is going to be Erin, actually, because I think that this conflict and the way that she has kind of handled herself with Jenna, I was surprised by how compelled I was by it at the end. 2B is going to be Jessel, just for having this party. 2C is going to be Ubah, for all the reasons that we mentioned. 2D... I don't know. I got it. Oh, Sai. How have I not mentioned Sai? Sai had such a great arc here. I think she actually deserves to be number 2 here because, I think she deserves to be number 2A1 lowercase I. Yeah, exactly.
There's one question that I had the whole time at Jessel's party was, what are the husbands talking about? Like, I was curious to know if they were douchebags, like nightclub style douchebags, or if they were like, nerdy guys who hit it big and were like, I'm finally going to have a hot wife now,
I think based on we get a little glimpse of Pavit and Abe talking, and that definitely leans much more nerdy guys.
Abe doesn't win a lot of arguments around that house.
We heard them talking about who can hold their breath the longest underwater is the clip that we got. So
which is so great. I think the season opener had a great moment like that too, where we had like all the women having like very intense, emotionally involved arguments, and we cut over to them and they're saying something like, well, "What's the loudest you've ever burped?" or something. just the stupidest like boy
got any cool
conversations.
And finally, my number 3 star for this week is Gideon, who we got a shot of on a FaceTime with Brynn, who I was happy to see. There's something just very charming about him. So shout out to Gideon. Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this, Dan. This has been a ton of fun. Do you want to let everyone know where they can find you?
So I go by the Canadian Computer Collector. You can find me mostly on YouTube, as I like to say. I've got socials like Insta, Twitter, and Facebook, but definitely go on YouTube and check out the Canadian Computer Collector. We just did a crazy unhinged Halloween live stream where we built a supercomputer that can predict the future. Since this is a completely different area of that, we basically got a friend to sit at a laptop off screen and type back crazy answers for people in the chat who asked the questions. And man, was it fun. We set everything up like a mad scientist lab.
Awesome. Dylan, how about yourself? This is going to be your last show for a bit. We're going to have Tim Gray filling in for you. So leave us
good
off
luck,
on
Tim. He's screwed already. You can find me on Substack as Dylan Ferguson. I write about movies.
Awesome. I'm Craig Midwinter. You can just find me on our Bravo Outsider socials at Bravo Outsider on most platforms, Instagram, TikTok. Be sure to give a call to the message or the toll-free number below, right here, blinking right here. Maybe not blinking. Maybe it's got lights around it. Leave us your Bravo takes. We're talking Real Housewives of New York and Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. So if you give us a call, leave a message, we'll play it on our next episode and we'll talk about whatever it is you have to say. We'll roast your opinion, tell you how wrong you are. We want to hear from you. We want to hear how out of touch we are, how big of an outsider we are, or if we've hit the nail on the head and you want to give us our props. Leave your flowers at the toll-free number below. Until next week, keep on wifing.